You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Focusing on the defensive side of the football here, ranking these four teams within their division from 4 through 1 as we head into the 2025 NFL season. Like I always say, I invite you all to comment down below. Let me hear from you all. Who do you like? Who do you dislike? How would you rank these teams from the four of them? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Or just anything that you want to add and throw into the discussion? Love hearing from you all in that comment section, so do not hesitate. Fire away down below. But like I said, we're talking the NFC West today, so we're going from 4 to number 1. So the 49ers, the Rams, the Cardinals, the Seahawks. How do these four defenses stack up amongst each other? And at the number 4 spot, a defense that really struggled last year. I do think they're going to take a good step forward. It's just a matter of how much in comparison to where the rest of these defenses were last season in the division. And the San Francisco 49ers will start out the group here at the bottom. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, I do think this group will take a step forward. They were obliterated by injuries and lost a lot of key pieces going throughout the season and even early on in the year before things even really got rolling. But ultimately, a lot of those pieces were picked up and taken away through free agency by other teams. The money situation in San Francisco was eventually going to call for this, and finally it has happened. So now we're looking at a fair amount of turnover on the defensive side of the football. And the way I see it is we kind of saw, in worst case situation, what this defense would look like with a ton of those guys that are now gone. Think like no Javon Hargrave, no Dre Greenlaw, no Talanoa Hufanga, no Leonard Floyd now. Like, there's a lot of guys that are no longer going to be on this defense that were either crucial or just wound up not really playing a ton, but were key pieces prior to their injuries that this defense will be missing. Now, obviously, you do look at what they did, and I think they did a solid job of trying to plug up some of those holes, whether it was through free agency or through the draft. I look at like a Trey Brown or maybe a guy like a Bryce Huff, who I think could wind up being like impact playmakers or guys that are going to, at the very least, see a fair amount of snaps. Bryce Huff, obviously having history in Robert Saleh's defense from his time in New York, had a bit of a weird year in Philadelphia for him, which was surprising just considering how it felt like everyone had a fantastic year in Philadelphia. His, not so much. Maybe it just wasn't a fit thing, whatever it may have been. Him being reunited with Robert Saleh should be really good for him. And then a guy like a Trey Brown, I do think is a good hole plugger for this secondary here. But you look at the guys from the rookie side of things, ton of draft capital going into this defense. In fact, you're looking at 5 guys in the first 4 rounds of this draft here that were all selected to help fix something, whether it's depth or a legitimate starting role within this defense. And it starts with the first 2 guys they took off the board here in the first and second round. You look at Michael Williams, you look at Alfred Collins, 2 young guys coming from big-time SEC schools who have been playing up against NFL-caliber offensive linemen through the duration of their collegiate careers. They're coming in, and they're going to have to step up and make plays immediately. Now, you look at like a Michael Williams, maybe not quite the statistical production you wanted to see from him, but he's considered an athletic freak second to none compared to just about anyone at the position coming out of the draft here. I think paired alongside a guy like a Nick Bosa, who is going to generate a ton of attention as he does every single year, that should be a really nice pairing there, and I think Michael Williams could benefit from that. And then on the inside, an Alfred Collins, big-bodied guy, he's coming in to plug up the holes on those inside runs and make sure running backs aren't even making it to the second level. He is that big-bodied run stuffer for a defense that had a really tough time stopping the run last year. I think that, again, good effort going out and plugging up the necessary holes that you had that needed to be filled. It's just a matter of, can all of these guys that you're calling upon that are coming in now to fit into this system and be immediate impact and do as much as possible to help lift you from being a bottom feeder defense like you were last season. I also just have like, I don't know if it's a concern, more so just like a curiosity as to how this secondary is really going to play itself out. I like a guy like a Diamador Lenore. We obviously just saw in the news literally today that he was arrested last night for obstruction of justice in a situation that he was involved in LA. Whether that even amounts to anything, I don't really know. I'm leaning on the side of I don't really think anything comes of it. Maybe like I think if like worst case scenario, if we're going to talk that, like maybe a game suspension, if that, and I don't even think that's the case. Like I could just see him getting fined and that being the end of that whole situation. We'll see whatever comes from that. I'm not really too worried about that, but it is something to at least have in your mind there. But I mean, love his game, love the way he plays for that secondary there. You have a young Renardo Green, second-round selection last year, who stepped up, took a ton of snaps, and I think is going to really flourish in his second year. So I'm looking to see does he take that next step as a legit starting outside corner for this team? How does Trey Brown fit into the fold? And then, of course, the back end of that defense, obviously seeing a lot of change here. Malik Mustafa, who looked really good last year, isn't even going to be ready to go, it looks like, for the start of the season. How long does it take for him to get in there? I don't love uncertainty in the back end of defenses. It's not like safety is the most important position in the world compared to some other spots, but those are your last line of defense guys, and not having a guy like a Malik Mustafa means guys like a Richie Grant or a Jason Pinnock, guys that you brought in that were probably supposed to be just depth pieces, might wind up seeing more playing time than you would have initially liked them to. So I do have some questions around the secondary, not a ton, but again, just a lot of turnover with this defense, a ton of names exiting, a ton of names entering in, and for a defense that sat near the bottom of the NFL last season, and you could maybe point to some of the offensive inefficiencies as to why maybe those numbers were to where they were, to the extent that they got to. But I do think that this 49ers team has a long way to go. And if we're looking at the jump that they're from, it was the rest of the division and the 49ers way down at the bottom. It's more so how much do they close that gap. For me, I could see them making themselves about an average level defense to maybe 15th, 14th overall in the NFL at the very best. Whereas you're talking the rest of the teams in this division as pretty stout units last year, and I don't really see anything coming from them that's going to make them regress. So I think you're just kind of dealing with stiff competition within your own division defensively. Looking into the number 3 spot here, moving up the board, I decided to go with the Arizona Cardinals, and there's a hint of a similar kind of reason for as to why I was so willing to settle with the 49ers at the number 4 spot, and it does have to do with a fair amount of turnover. I will say this, though. The turnover that you are getting in Arizona is absolutely an upgrade in just about every facet when you look at who they brought in comparison to who they let go or who just they're taking the role over from. And I have a really hard time looking at just about anyone that they're bringing in this year that's going to come in and have to take over starting snaps. That probably isn't going to be better than the guy that was in their spot literally last season. I love the addition that they made initially off the jump, spending all that money on Josh Sweat, someone who has just been incredible during his time in Philadelphia, and somebody who himself played under Jonathan Gannon while he was defensive coordinator in Philadelphia. I think that's going to bode really well for him. Jonathan Gannon should know exactly how to use him within his defense, and I think he's going to be great. 43 career sacks. This is someone who, for the last, I would say 4 or so years, probably hung somewhere around the 8 sack per season mark on average, so should be a huge plus coming off the edge for a pass rush that struggled to be consistent at times last year, and just for the last few seasons as well. Calais Campbell, the ageless, making his homecoming return to Arizona is always an interesting story to see. Literally a team that was letting him go at, I believe, the end of his age 29 season and is now bringing him in for his age 39 season is one of those wacky things to see, but a homecoming nonetheless, and someone who has literally his entire career been consistent, available, always productive, and this is someone who's probably going to bring you 4, 5, 6 sacks, pressure from the interior. He can plug up against the run as well. Big addition there. Whoever he's replacing in that defense from last year, bar none in my eyes, he's probably going to be an upgrade over, even if he is going to be 39 this season. Walter Nolan, seeing year-over-year growth in the SEC himself, going from Texas A&M to Ole Miss in his last season. First-round selection there. Once more, I think this is a plus addition for the defensive front. And then Baron Browning is someone that I'm really banking on for the Arizona Cardinals' sake as a guy that if he can at least stay healthy, he can be productive. That has probably been the biggest thing for him throughout his career, is just not being able to stay on the football field with the amount of time he has missed each and every single season. But he has been productive at times in certain seasons, racking up 4, maybe 5 sacks in a year at most, but also missing, 4, 5, 6 games in that year. So if he can just stay healthy and start off the edge and not miss the amount of time he has missed basically every season of his career so far, he's no slouch when it comes to getting after the quarterback, and I think he should be good there. So overall, as far as the defensive line or just defensive front as a whole is concerned, whether it's coming off the edges or the interior, I feel really good about them. Then the secondary, love the additions there. Denzel Burke and Will Johnson, I think, should be upgrades for that secondary on top of it, let alone the guys you already have in there, like a Garrett Williams, a Budda Baker, a Jalen Thompson, but I think these guys will be nice additions there. Will Johnson was a second-round selection that raised a lot of eyebrows because a lot of people considered him a mid to late first-round pick because of his size, IQ, athleticism combination there. And then someone like a Denzel Burke, who is just like you don't get a ton of corners in the NFL, especially at his size, that are just so willing to get in there and be a run defender or just get after whoever it is that has the ball in their hand. He is a short tackler, brings the thunder. Maybe technique needs a little bit of work, was something that kept popping up when I was reading up scouting reports on him. But overall, I think, again, plus addition there. The Cardinals team has seen a lot of positive turnover on paper in my eyes, and this defense should be getting better this year. But there is always a slight chance that all this turnover is for naught and it doesn't go the way you want it to. So that's kind of why I decided to settle on Arizona at number 3. There is a good chance I'm wrong about this one. I'll openly acknowledge it. And I do like the direction they're heading here. But when I look at the teams at 2-1, more consistency, overall good defenses themselves that I think are going to take another step forward more. And I feel a little bit more comfortable just with those two teams as opposed to where Arizona's currently at. Again, just a lot of uncertainty that I think is going to go well. It's just a matter of let me see it on the football field. Moving into the top half of the division, though, number 2 and number 1, there is a lot of conversation that can be had about both these teams in my eyes. And you look at what Seattle did last year in the first season under coach Mike Macdonald. Unbelievable stuff for a defense that on paper was as good as it was. Finally, I think played to the level of the paper roster that they had, and I loved watching it happen. And then you look at the Rams, a really young group altogether, especially up front on the defensive side of the football. And for me, there is a piece that feels like I kind of had to project a little bit as far as progression goes on this one, because this is me more so going with a gut feeling than anything else. But I decided to settle with Seattle at number 2. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't really look at this roster and go, there's really anything I don't like about it that doesn't make me think it could potentially be a top 10 unit. It's just more so the belief that I have in the number 1 team in the Los Angeles Rams here. Now, you look at Seattle, year 1, like I said, very good under coach Mike Macdonald and Aiden Durd, the defensive coordinator, a really talented unit, finally playing to that level. I expect it to get better this season. DeMarcus Lawrence should be a plus for Seattle. Already a solid pass rush last year, best in the division last year, and I do think bringing him in is a great guy. Obviously a veteran presence for a group of guys that could maybe use a little bit more leadership in what DeMarcus Lawrence has been able to do for his entire tenure in Dallas, and maybe just some of those younger guys that you have in there, maybe learning a thing or two from him. I look at guys like Boye Mafe and Derek Hall, who could probably benefit from having a guy like a DeMarcus Lawrence in that room. And I think with those guys behind him, there's a lot going on there. And then you have like a Uchenna Nwosu, who you're just hoping and crossing your fingers that he can stay healthy, because I think healthy in this group here, working alongside of DeMarcus Lawrence, you have yourself possibly once again the best pass rush in the division. Very much a possibility with the way things are set up coming off the edges. On top of that, as far as the interior or the inside linebackers go, I feel like what you have with Ernest Jones is, and then Tyrese Knight on top of it, is very similar to what Mike Macdonald was working with in a sense, with just the talent level that he was dealing with in Baltimore when you're looking at Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen. I almost feel like Ernest Jones and Tyrese Knight could be that pairing that he had in those two guys in Baltimore. Maybe they're not the exact same players, but just having two guys on the inside as your linebackers, being able to trust in those guys to lead the way on the interior of your defense or in the middle of that defense is it sounds so much like what he had going on in Baltimore, and I love the comparison of it. And then on top of that, when you see just the production that you got out of Ernest Jones once you traded for him in Tennessee, like things were not going well in Tennessee, and I feel like it kind of was obvious once he finally got settled in Seattle and got rolling. Maybe it was a scheme fit. Maybe Tennessee just wasn't the right place for him. Like whatever the issue may have been, Mike Macdonald very clearly knew what to do with him when he plugged him in, and the numbers definitely showed during the back half of the season while Ernest Jones was in Seattle. And then the secondary, is just about as deep as any as you could ask for in the NFL. Julian Love obviously proving to be a home run pickup for the team last offseason, led the team in tackles, 3 interceptions on top of that, handful of passes defensed as well. And then, of course, Tariq Woolen, Devin Witherspoon rounding out a fairly strong group of defensive backs altogether. You go out and you draft a guy like Nick Emanwari, who is just an absolute athletic monster and is someone that think like Kyle Hamilton again in Baltimore, someone that Mike McDonald, I'm sure, loved working with during the time that he had him there. That's kind of what you're getting out of a Nick Eamon-Worry as well. So like, I look at this defense and I think it's going to be really good next year. I don't really have too many things I don't like about it. And it's just more so, can guys like Uchenna Nwosu stay healthy? Do we see even more progression from some of these younger guys that have already looked good so far in their careers? Like and we didn't even like mention guys like a Byron Murphy, their first round pick from last year, or like Leonard Williams on the interior of the defensive line. Like, there's so much to like about this team. I just have this feeling in my gut that the team I have at number 1 in the Los Angeles Rams might be able to take them over. And a lot of it starts with the incredible core of guys that they have along that defensive front. You look at Defensive Rookie of the Year, Jared Verse, 4.5 sacks, one of the highest pressure counts in the NFL as a rookie last season. He basically needs to just take that ability to create the pressure that he was creating last season and find a way to finish it. And in year number 2, this could be when that happens. I've always said 2-3 years for some of those guys to really round out into form coming off the edges. And this feels like Jared Verse, probably closer to the 2 than 3 year side of things, is going to be that guy to make that jump. He was incredible in year number 1. Then you look at like the rest of the guys that are coming after the quarterback or just overall working that defensive front. Byron Young, Kobe Turner, and Braden Fisk, who led the team with 8.5 sacks as a rookie himself last season, all combining for 24 total. These are guys that were drafted either last year's draft or the year prior, so 2024, 2023, and they've all been extremely productive. Verse being round 1, Fisk being round 2 last year, and then the year prior, 2 third-round selections in Kobe Bryant and Byron Young, and they have paid off in dividends. Then you look at like the addition of a guy like Apuna Ford, who comes in, run-stuffing defender, who can maybe make some pressure and get after the quarterback as well, but you're bringing him in for that massive size to help slow down teams against the run, because that 4.6 yards per attempt was not great for the team and was kind of their bigger weakness as far as trying to slow our offenses down. I love what they're doing up front, and I don't really see that group taking any step back. I envision a full step forward for everyone. Again, everyone's so young and already so good, and I don't really see why things wouldn't take maybe a little bit of a step further. Maybe Braden Fisk's not racking up another 8.5 sacks. Maybe he's getting closer to like 5.5, 6 or something like that. But I think as a unit overall, this team is set to take another step forward, at least up front there on defense. Then you have, of course, the situation in the secondary here. Cameron Kitchens, hell of a rookie season, 4 interceptions last year. You have a pretty deep group altogether because you obviously, of course, have Cameron Curl, who you brought in from Washington last year. Jalen McCullough, who himself also had 4 interceptions, rounding out that strong safety room. You'd hope to see maybe a little bit more of calculated aggression from the secondary, and I think we might see that coming up this season here. But I like the unit as a whole. You have a really good veteran presence in the secondary with a good mix of younger guys like a Quentin Lake going alongside guys like a Kella Witherspoon and a Darius Williams. But the unit feels like it's in the right spot. If I really was to point out a concern, and this is where Seattle does have an edge over the Rams in my opinion, it's going to be that linebacker room, because you have Omar Spates, who led the room, but after him, it's kind of a bit of a no man's land. You let Christian Roseboom go, who ended up having a really good season last year for the team. But like when you look at just the rest of the guys that you have in there, a Nate Landman who was brought in, Troy Reeder, Chris Paul Jr., who you drafted in the 5th round. I mean, there's not a ton of names that really do a ton for me there, and I'm really interested to see what this Rams team does. But a lot of it just has to do with how stout this defense looks up front for me. I love that entire group from right to left going up front, from Jared Verse to Byron Young to Kobe Turner to Poona Ford to Braden Fisk. I think they're going to wreak some serious havoc, and it's going to be a problem here. You could argue maybe even Seattle has a slight edge over them because, again, they're no slouch themselves with a Leonard Williams, a Byron Murphy, a Jaron Reed, DeMarcus Lawrence, and Uchenna Nwosu. But health concerns for both DeMarcus Lawrence and Uchenna Nwosu make me fade the Seattle Seahawks a little bit here. And for me, an excellent pass rush, a really stout unit up front can maybe mask a slightly weaker secondary in LA over Seattle, who I think has the better secondary, but I just love what they are doing up front. This is more a gut feeling than anything else. I'll openly be willing to admit that, but there's also nothing really here aside from there's just not really a ton there that makes me feel like this defense over in LA shouldn't be able to take the step forward that I'm anticipating here. Maybe I could be wrong, I'll openly admit it, but I like what the Rams are putting together here. That group up front is just so impressive, and I'm having a hard time shying away from them there. So I'll give the Rams the edge of the number 1 spot by like a hair. I don't think the gap is very large between them and Seattle. I would say they're neck and neck. If you really like the Rams a little bit more, you really like Seattle a little bit more, I totally see the argument for both sides. I just opted to settle with the Rams on this one. So let me know in the comment section down below your thoughts, your opinions on the NFC West defenses. How would you rank them? Things that you agree and disagree with, let me know. I would love to hear from you all. But that is it for me. As always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.